Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. Last December, I was invited to join a community initiative called 100 Cups of Coffee. The initiative identified community leaders and asked them to meet one-on-one for at least an hour. The objective was to draw people together and align our community. In all honesty, I am not sure how my name was added to a list of community leaders, but I accepted the invite because I knew meeting a lot of these people would give me an opportunity to extend some invitations for this podcast. Richel Brousseau was one of those people I met, and it didn't take me long in our meeting to decide that, yes, she had to be on this show. Very open, very well spoken, and she's also one of those people that just by talking to you makes you feel good about yourself. And I can't explain how that is, but when I left that meeting, I felt really good about myself. So someone who I know will be very enlightening and completely interesting, Richel Brousseau. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to this podcast. And I know we've been back and forth for a while now trying to plan it. You're a very busy lady.
Yes.
It says here, trauma release practitioner. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that in itself opens up a whole can of interesting.
Oh, yes, it does. I say it's a can of worms that you can't really put back in the can once you open it. There's a whole lot of titles that I, over the years, have held and that I still hold, but trauma release in practice is what I love to kind of lead with, because then all the other pieces of what it is I do and what it is I am kind of fall into place, and it's the most digestible for people to be able to understand.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Okay, we will get to that, but first I'd like to start off with we've only met once.
Yes.
And have had to exchange a couple text messages. So let's get to know you a little bit better here. Let's start. You didn't grow up that far from St. Paul.
I did not.
Okay.
St. Paul was actually a vacation when we would come to St. Paul for some UFO pizza or movie. So St. Paul actually held a really big part in my heart as a little girl.
Right.
I grew up in Harry Hill, Alberta. So,
okay.
you blink and you miss it.
Yep.
I went to school in Two Hills, Alberta, but I lived on a farm just north of Harry Hill my entire life. Mm-hmm. We were elk farmers and beef farmers as well. And it became a life of living in our little kind of square radius and not being able to really leave the farm. So what I knew growing up was what I knew. We didn't really get to see much of the outside world due to the nature of being a farmer.
Right.
And it was always one of those things that as I got older, I started to really question, oh my, things are a little bit different when you leave the farm. So yeah, it's been a journey.
You had mentioned too when we met that on top of the farming, you had got into manufacture. Was it dog food?
Yes, it is. So my dad actually still owns our pet food company.
Okay.
And yeah, we in the early 2000s, as the elk industry kind of took a little bit of a plummet due to CWD, which is chronic wasting disease. It's kind of like equivalent to BSE in the beef industry. All of our markets crashed, and our animals went from being worth thousands of dollars to a couple $100.
Wow.
And then drought hit and we had no food to feed them. So many farmers were literally killing their animals and putting them in pits because they couldn't afford the feed. And so my dad has always been incredibly innovative. He's one of the smartest people I know. And he decided we were going to start making raw dog food. So at age 7, I would come home from school and we would butcher our animals and have a little tear session, because it's not something we wanted to do,
right,
but we had to. And we would stand and make meatballs out of ice cream scoops for hours.
Wow. You had told a story in relation to that, because you guys did a lot of trade fairs as well.
We did, yes. So literally from age 7, I was 7, my brother was 6, my sister was 9, and we started to be little entrepreneurs. And that's where I swore to the Lords above that I was never going to be an entrepreneur, but here we are, 20 some years later, how things have changed.
No kidding.
That yeah, we would go to trade shows and we would sell people and counsel people and educate people on the benefits of feeding their dogs raw food.
Right.
We would, my go-to line was, would you eat a raw carrot or a cooked carrot? Which one has more nutritional value?
I'm already sold.
Right? It got to the point where we had gone to Kondak Days once, and there was this old man who went by, my brother, who's a year younger than me. Him and I were manning the booth while mom and dad were, I think they were getting lunch or something. And this little old man came by in his walker, and his wife was in a wheelchair, and we were talking, we just like led into the spiel, and he was like, oh yeah, he was just like so engrossed in what we had to say that he literally had taken one of the raw treats that we had on display, and I could see my brother's eyes just get like wide as saucers as this old man took this raw dog treat that had heart, liver, ground bone, like all the things, took this raw treat and like ate it and was like, that's pretty good, and just walked away. It was like super traumatizing for my brother, but that's how we knew we were good at talking.
Did he know it was dog food, or he just thought
I have no idea to this day. My brother had a panic attack and went running around the trade show hall trying to find my mom and being like, Mom, he's gonna die. But, you know, I always like laughed because I was like, Ral, you could literally convince anyone to do anything.
So from growing up on a farm, small town school education, everything like that, you had, I guess, a limited view. If St. Paul's the vacation and the big city.
Straight up.
How did you decide where you were going to go as you grew up professionally? Because you got into the healthcare profession. And
I did.
How did you lead into that, I guess?
So I always had a love for helping people. It was something that I never wanted to hurt the animals. I thought of veterinary school for a long time. Even though we grew up on the farm, we were shown a very holistic way of life. We were shown a very kind of broad range of understandings of different medicinal properties, holistic practices. My mom and my dad were both very spiritual, holistic people. I always laughed that I was the only reason we went to a hospital because I was super accident prone. I was the one that needed the stitches. I was the one that kept cutting herself or needing all these different things. So growing up, we really ground into what it meant to live on the land, what it meant to have these places a part of creation that we used as medicine, plants, herbs, tinctures, different practices like that. And then as I got older, of course, just human evolution, we want to do what we don't know. We don't want to do the same thing. Yeah. And I started in healthcare, working in long-term care in Two Hills, taking care of my little Babas and Guidos. Yeah. And it really struck a chord for me. I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Taking care of people who had stories, listening to their stories, listening to how they've lived their lives, what they could remember, and helping them when they couldn't help themselves with something that I was super passionate about. And I will never forget to this day, when I got my university acceptance letter in the mail, my mom was like, well, kid, good luck. Good luck being a nurse. I don't think you're going to do it long, but good luck. She had but had encouraged me to look at more holistic options. But I was like, no, I want something that I will have security, because obviously growing up in a farming life, that wasn't something we necessarily had. I was like, I don't want to be my own boss. I don't want to have any question if I'll ever have a job. I want security. I want safety. I want stability. And I was like, man, that's nursing. Yeah. There are never enough nurses.
No, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. As many hours as you want.
Straight up. Yep. I learned that real quick.
Yeah. Did you find it, so growing up, like you said, a more holistic viewpoint on taking care of yourself, like the way you were raised with your family, but was there a bit of, I don't want to say a culture shock or a practice?
100%.
Yeah.
To see what spirituality, holistic health now is absolutely mind-boggling to me, because when I was growing up, that was something you didn't talk about. Right. You smelled like the weird essential oil kid in the background, but you didn't talk about it. Right. You didn't talk about your mom going and taking you to a practitioner before she took you to a doctor. Right. So that was something that definitely was not talked about. We didn't tell people that we were more holistic at home. It was hush hush. You didn't talk about it. And for it to be so widely acceptable now really, really brings some warmth to my heart, because my mom didn't get that. She always had to feel like she had to hide something of what she thought was medicine. Right. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see any correlation between learning conventional medicine through going through nursing school, and did you ever see draw parallels between the two? Because
100%.
what we know as modern medicine today came from
definitely
Right.
somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And it was so much trial and error. And when I was in nursing school, I like remember literally as I was making my drive here, I'm like, how interesting it would have been if I would have taken a different course. If I would have like said, you know what, this just doesn't really align with me, instead of just persevering and pushing through, would I still have a 4-year education that 6 years later I'm not using?
Right.
Or that I'm choosing to step away from? I definitely see the parallels, but I also see the huge, massive gaps that there are.
Right.
And that's what started my journey. That's what started Lasuna and Lucidity Wellness.
Right. So, okay. So let's get into that. So you went to school for nursing, you took your 4 years and then you work now you're just leaving the nursing profession to, and like you said before we started recording, not for any negative reasons, but for the fact that your business is becoming too busy right now to hold both. So let's talk about the nursing side of it right now. So your years in nursing, when did you decide that you were going to start moving towards, I guess, a different...
So I started as a labor and delivery nurse. When I got out of, when I was actually in my 4th year of nursing school, we have something called a preceptorship. And that's kind of where we get to dip our toes in of what it is that we might want to do once we graduate. And I ended up getting my preceptorship in Bonnyville in labor and delivery. And it was like, changed my life. It was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Right. This is how I want to support women. You know, every time that I was in a delivery, I would like look to my preceptor and I'm like, is it okay to cry? Like, can I cry? Because this is so beautiful. And it was this thing that like one of the most powerful things that I know I'll go to the grave feeling is the power of a woman bringing her baby earthside. Like literally, I get chills just thinking about it because it's one of the most magical experiences to be a part of, but it can also be one of the most heart-wrenching experiences as well. So I obviously started in labor and delivery, and then a year and a half once I had graduated, I got diagnosed with precancerous cells in my uterus. I was 6 months away from getting married, and I had no idea what to do. So out of panic, out of fear, out of desperation, you know, they were saying like, this is something we don't commonly see in someone who's 22. This is something we see in postmenopausal women. And I was like, okay, well, that doesn't sound very good. And it became this thing of like, out of desperation and fear, I kind of like gave it all to what others were willing to tell me and what others had to say about what was going on. And after a year and a half of meds, surgery, different biopsies, multiple biopsies, it became this thing that after a year and a half, they were like, well, we don't really know why your body's not responding. And it was kind of this point where my husband stopped coming home at night because on the hormone medication that I was on, I literally remember calling my mom and saying, Mom, like, I think you need to take me to a psychiatry hospital. I feel like I'm fucking losing it. And it was like this thing that I literally didn't feel like myself anymore. My husband would like stay at his parents', have dinner there, say he was working because I would bawl my face off all day long, wanting to see him so badly. And then as soon as he got home, I wanted to rip his fucking face off. Like, honest to God, it was the most...
Wow.
inexplainable feeling, and it's still like I feel that and where she was at because it was something you had no control over,
right? And
it really, really humbled me really quickly.
Are you saying it was the medication that was caused? Okay.
Okay. It was like such, because essentially they wanted the medication to build up in my system so strongly to then get my body to like have a forced menstrual cycle, because they thought that was the reason why my body had these mutating cells that were just growing. And it came to this point where when my doctor did another biopsy and was like, we don't think what we're doing is like working, I was just like, then I'm done. I was like, I'm ready to wash my hands of this. I can't keep doing this. And it was like, honestly, probably one of the lowest moments in my life. I feel like I've had a few in my short lifetime. But it was one of those times where it was just like, choose your hard.
Right. So Do you think the medical...
Ben, that might be a loaded question. I can feel where you're going with this. Go ahead, though.
There's options out there. Let's put it that
100%.
way. And there's
there is.
options that the conventional medical, I don't want to say industry.
You wouldn't be wrong.
Strongly advocates against.
Or
I think
doesn't care to think exists, for sure.
But it's like, I don't know how to word it. Why is there such a strong opposition to it? But I use the term industry, and I guess at the end of the day, when you treat something like a business, people lose their value.
For sure. And
in the grand scheme of things, and you have to keep feeding the machine. So
definitely
healthy people isn't good
Feed
for
the
business.
machine.
In healthcare anyways. So
absolutely.
I guess maybe I'm just drawing my own conclusion on this, and you're somewhat confirming it without confirming it, I guess.
Absolutely. Wink, wink.
Yeah. So you're brought to this point now where conventional medicine isn't helping you.
For sure. And where I'm frustrated and where I feel really alone.
Yeah.
Because we can keep doing these things. We can keep trying the next thing. It became a thing where like my nurse brain would kick in and I'd be like, but I wouldn't put up with this for a patient. Mm-hmm. So why am I still doing this?
Yeah. I
would want to be advocating for my patient if I was the nurse right now, but why am I just sitting here listening and taking what this is? You know, my husband, for one of the last biopsies that I had done, had come with me, and you're wide awake, you're in the stirrups, you get a speculum, and they take what I call an apple core, and they literally go past your cervix and scrape your uterine lining while you're awake. There's no analgesic, there's no nothing. And the last time that I had my last biopsy, I was holding my husband's hand and my tears were just flowing. I could literally feel them pooling in my ears. And I could just feel my husband tensing beside me, because this was the first time that he was recognizing what I had done already 11 times. Mm-hmm. And he spoke up and was like, I think you're done.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to breathe, and so grateful for him in that moment that he was able to say, this is enough. Mm-hmm. And it just... It's one of those things where I always tell my clients and anybody that I talk to, Western medicine, our healthcare system has a job. It has a really, really important job, and that is life-saving care. And there's other care outside of that. I'm now a cancer clinic nurse, which means I give people their chemotherapy and their treatments as they're battling their journeys with cancer. And that's where healthcare is multifaceted. But we've also used and abused our system, in my opinion. I feel like we have put all of our eggs in one basket, and we expect it all to be able to go somewhere. I remember in nursing school in my third year, we were in interdisciplinary, and that was where we were with physiotherapists, speech pathologists, doctors, nurses, social workers. It was all the professions that you would be working with in a hospital dynamic, you were in this seminar class with. And I remember in my third year, most of the med students were in their fourth or fifth year. We were talking about some care plans and things like that. And I'd be talking to them and they'd be like, but what does that mean? And I'm like, yo, you're like a doctor. I'm just a third year nursing student.
Yeah.
And it's because there is no freaking way one human brain can hold all of the things that it needs to know everything of everything.
Right.
But yet, as patients, as a society, we put all into the healthcare system, show up with an ailment, with a dis-ease, with a dysfunction, with an illness. And we're like, so tell me what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
You know better than I do. And in that moment when that doctor was like, I don't think what we're doing is working, that's where I really took a step back and I was like, Richel, what have you done to actually look at what's wrong with you?
Right.
And that's where I led into this journey of, I called my mom bawling, my poor mom. And moms just hold that burden. And I was like, I think I have to figure this out. And she was like, well, Shell, that was my nickname growing up.
Right.
She was like, you know that you have other options. And I was like, I know, but why haven't I been looking at them? And it was like one of those things where I just sat and I cried because I was like, I've perpetuated my own torture. I have like sat thinking that something or someone was going to be able to give me these answers when time and time again, I wasn't getting any, or they were a guess, or they were, well, it could be this. Why hadn't I started sooner? And now 2020 vision is super clear that obviously all of those things created this beautiful opportunity for me to get to know myself, for me to start to dive into what it meant to actually heal my body, because nobody can do it for you. No practitioner, no doctor, just you and what you believe is much bigger than you. That's the only two people that get to choose if you're going to heal or not. And so I started reading books. I started taking courses. I started doing all of these things. And lo and behold, my cycles started to regulate. My body started to feel better. And it was just this like sense of knowing that I was okay, that I wasn't all of a sudden wasn't going to get diagnosed with something. I like could feel it in my body that my body was changing. And it's like an inexplainable feeling. My clients often say that they're just like, we don't really know how to explain to people what you do. And I'm like, because everybody's different, because it's a feeling. It's not a word. It's not something that you can necessarily describe. It's a sensation that only you know how to understand.
I feel like it's you were telling yourself
100%.
To get better.
Permission. Huge. Permission is huge.
Yeah. But if you think it, you can achieve it. Yeah.
Definitely.
So I guess, is that something that you figured out through the reading and the courses, or is this something that subconsciously crept into your mind to say that, well, if you're not going to heal me, I'm just going to heal myself?
Straight up. And you know what? People are like, so when did you start doing what you do? And I was like, that's a really good question. Because age 9 comes up often for me, that I feel like I've been doing this my whole life.
Okay.
I just had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
And when I started taking my courses, when I started listening from other teachers, from elders, from masters in their trade, I started to understand, oh shit, but I've been doing that. How did I know how to do that? How did I know that if you moved your hands in that way, manipulated the tissue in that way, that it would give a release that way? How did I know that if you linked this organ with this fascial tissue, that would actually create some reaction in the body?
Right.
And as I was taking these teachings, it was like these moments of like light bulbs. It was like, oh my Lord, how did I not know I was doing this?
Right.
So I truly believe that we all have a healer within. It's called our innate intelligence, and it's our mammalistic brain. It's our mammalistic ability to heal. When we look at a lion, if a lion breaks its leg, it doesn't just fucking sit there waiting for the lion doctor to come and splint it and cast it and this and that. Its tribe, its pride will start to gather around it to protect it. It may lay differently. It may lay up against a rock. It may do these different things, and it heals. And that's our mammalistic ability within our bodies to allow ourselves to start to heal. But through society, through conditioning, through what we know as medicine, it was trial and error of people knowing more than somebody else, and that passed down knowledge and that passed down lineage, that I feel like we've lost that ability. We're coming back to it now, but we are toddlers.
Yeah.
We are like needing everything pureed to be able to digest it. That like we have lost this ability to trust our bodies. We have lost this ability to know what healing actually is. And it's coming back to that sense of self and getting back in what I call our meat suit. Because our meat suit is our home. It goes everywhere with us. Our body is our home. It's our first home, and it's going to be our last home. But yet we have very little relationship with it. And that's what I had to find. I had to find that ability to come back in my body that wasn't to shield. That wasn't this garbage dumpster for all of my shitty thoughts. That wasn't this sense of like holding all the painful, sad, hurt things in my life that my body started to become something that I wanted to be in. And it was a session that I had with a body talk practitioner that really, I feel now, shifted the trajectory of my journey. I was listening to the recording because I didn't see her in person. She just I gave her my 3 things I wanted to work on, my 3 intentions, and she did my session and recorded it and sent it back to me. And she said, Richel, you hold so much anger in your womb. She was like, that's why your body can't menstruate properly. And she was like, I keep seeing this story of your mom being terrified to have another baby with your father, and that she actually was hoping that she would miscarry. And my whole body started to shake. I was crying profusely, and I was like, why am I doing this? This doesn't even make sense. My mom loves me. I've always that's never been a question in her mind. She's never said she didn't want me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But my body was reacting. I was shaking.
Right.
I was crying. It was incontrollable. My husband literally, that poor guy, came and put a hand on me and was like, are you okay? And I was like, I don't know if I was wanted. And it was this thing that my body felt the resonance of what she said. But my brain, my little Eiffel Tower that I love to stay in, was like, but that can't be true.
Right.
And I still to this day will never forget my mom's face when I said, were you hoping or subconsciously wishing that you would have a miscarriage with me because you were scared to have another kid with Dad? And she just went white as a ghost. And she was like, who told you that? And I was like, oh. I was like, shit. This some shit.
Okay, you threw out a lot of words there.
I know.
In the last, but it's good because it helps us lead in. So now let's fast forward here. You're a trauma release practitioner.
Yes.
You mentioned the healing journey. You did drop the thing body talks.
Yes.
And how our body talks to us.
So I am a trauma release, body talk, astrological psychologist practitioner. So I have a few different titles. I've taken about 9 courses now, on top of my nursing degree and life degree, I like to call it. So body talk is one of my abilities to serve and help the body when it's needed. Trauma release is what I have created as my own practice.
Okay.
Body talk is actually a founded practice that is taught all over the country, all over the world. It was actually established by John Veltheim in, I'm pretty sure, New Zealand or Australia. So there are tons of modalities. People often say to me, well, Richel, how can I even start? And I'm like, where can you not start? There are so many different modalities in the world that it is absolutely insane that we don't know about them. So body talk is just one of those different modalities.
So, and I heard a few things there too. You talked about moving tissue in hands. So obviously part of it, we talked about the power of the mind. So
yes.
there's the mental aspect of it, but do you have physical practices as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So I like to tell people you actually have 4 bodies. We just know, and it feels most physically palpable to know the physical. We actually have a mental body, we have an emotional body, and we have a spiritual body and a physical body. And those bodies all work together. They all kind of like strands of DNA interlink with each other, and they all create the balanced body that we physically feel. Often, if you are feeling unwell, if you are feeling dysfunction, if your physical body is showing you something, there are some things going on. When your physical body is trying to get a hold of you, it's because you've missed the 3 other calls that were trying to come in. So I always tell people, we work with everything. We can't just pick one and expect the others to just play catch up. It comes back to my nursing career as well. If you were coming into a merge, how would you triage what was coming in? What's the most important one? Which one is most harmed, most hurt? And 90% of the time, the things that are going to kill you, you can't see.
Right.
Right? If you're bleeding internally, you're not going to see that.
Yeah.
We're going to have cues. We're going to see things that kind of give us an idea of where the issue is, but you're not going to see it. So when it's coming up in your physical body, that's because all the bodies are like, hello, are you going to pay attention yet?
Yeah.
Your body is an alarm system, and we get so good at disarming that alarm system, at muting that alarm system, that like maybe we have anxiety, maybe we have skin issues, maybe we have headaches, maybe we have issues falling asleep, maybe we have all these little symptoms that we think are nothing, or that we like to distract ourselves from, or we're like, I'm just tired, I'm just stressed, it's just that time of month, like whatever it is. Yeah. We like, it gets so good at creating these like excuses for things that are trying to get our attention.
Mm-hmm. How do I want to word this?
I could talk for days, Ben.
No, I know, but I have a question, but I always get distracted because
it's that 7-year-old selling them meatballs, man.
There you go. I'm all into it. No, it's okay, so when you were younger, you talked about how this was kind of a taboo thing. It's becoming more common to talk about. You have a really practical way of
looking at it
and discussing it, which actually, with the way people think conventionally, they're thinking, well, okay, you could sell them on it, right?
100%.
Yeah. I don't think selling the individual is going to be the tough thing. Do you think there's a place for this kind of, I don't want to say treatment, but for lack of a better word, this kind of treatment in our conventional medicine? Do you think they will start bringing it on? Because to me, why would you limit your opportunities to heal people?
100%. And a part of it is fear plays such a big part. I saw it in my own journey. I've seen it in so many of my patients. That fear plays such a big part that if we don't know exactly how it's going to work, if we don't know exactly how that person came to that conclusion, it may be intriguing, but also scares the shit out of most people. Mm-hmm. And that's where people just lock it down. They just shut it down because we've been taught in school and society that we have to have the answers. You know, think back to when you were in elementary or high school. If you didn't have the answer or you didn't know, the teacher was like, well, did you not do your homework? Or other kids made fun of you, or all of these things where we were conditioned into being felt like we always had to know.
Yeah.
Right? And it's lost that ability for things like faith, like trust, like the taboo things that not everybody gets to know. And I was super fortunate in my childhood. There was a lot of things that, you know, we didn't have, or that came at a little bit of a cost, that led me to what I now do. You know, I'm not a trauma release practitioner because things were peachy keen.
Right.
It came from experience, because we cannot have wisdom if we don't have experience.
Right.
And I literally say to my parents to this day that, like, I'm so grateful we had the life that we did. Was it easy? Absolutely fucking not. There were days where, you know, I didn't think I was going to make it home that day, or whatever the case may have been. But I'm grateful because now at a very young age, most people think I'm in my 30s and 40s, but I am very young, but I have a ton of wisdom because I've had a ton of experience.
Right. Mm-hmm. I think I had brought this up when we met a couple months ago, because we talked about, like, if this is something people are exploring more and more, because we deal with a platform of public health care, that it's got coverages, but if somebody comes to see you, they're not covered. Not covered. But you had an interesting answer for that.
That when everything is covered, and there's always this like sense of doing it because it's under coverage, it's an expectancy that I have seen it in my business, that if people don't pay for what they are doing, they don't value it. Right. Straight up, I could give somebody a free session and I can guarantee you they will not have as transformative experience as someone who's paying for their session. Right. I have literally seen it. I had charged $133 for my sessions for the first 2.5 years of my business. And it got to a point where people were just coming for fun. They had heard from a friend that it was interesting, so they thought that they would come, because $133 was like good enough money to blow, that
Right.
it wasn't that important. And I literally doubled my prices. And I will tell you, that was one of the best things I've ever done, because the people who sit in that chair, who sit in front of me, want and need to be there.
Right.
That they are not just there out of convenience. And how often I see people who don't really care what their doctor, what their physiotherapist, what their massage therapist has said, because they're just like, meh, whatever. In another month, I'll go for another massage, or I'll
Yeah.
go back for more of these medications, that they don't do anything outside of it because it's convenience.
Yeah.
And that is one of, I feel, our breaking points as a society, is everything is convenient and everything is instantaneous. Like literally, if we don't see instantaneous results, we're like, it doesn't work.
You had also mentioned too that the objective was that you did not want to see people long term.
100%.
Yeah. So
Literally. Yeah.
So
I don't want to see my clients forever. That's not something that I'm
Right.
interested in. I want to give you tools. I want to give you pathways. I want to give you abilities to begin to find these tools and things yourself, because I don't want to see you for 20 years. I sure as fuck won't be doing this for 20 years. I'll tell you that right now. I plan on like retiring at 45.
That in itself may be why the healthcare system doesn't explore this,
100%.
because you're taking people off the market
Definitely.
and empowering them more.
And I always say life is a scale. There is not going to be everyone who goes to one side or the other. You're always going to have, we need that balance. And you know, we see healthcare in the last couple of years. In 5 years, I'm ready to wash my hands of healthcare. It has become not what I started in a very, very short amount of time. And there's a huge part in that, because the scales have been imbalanced, that we have been relying and burning out our resource to the point where there's literally nothing left.
I also think the important frontline professionals aren't being listened to as much.
100%. But that, yeah, I feel like that's been a long time.
Bureaucrats and administrators, and you say you get experience or knowledge from experience. Well, you have people making decisions who have zero experience. Yeah,
For sure.
So I'm going to leave it at that for now, because we filled up time very, very quickly.
I know
here,
we did.
and that's perfect. But I always say leave them wanting more, right? So your business, though, you mentioned at the beginning, what was it called again? If people want to find out more information from you,
So my business is Lasuna and Lucidity Wellness.
okay,
I have a Facebook page, a Instagram page, and a website. My website is letthelightin.ca.
okay,
That's pretty much the best place to kind of see what I offer and what I'm all about. I always tell people, I don't care if somebody referred you, go to my website and see if I'm for you.
okay.
There is not meant to be, I'm not supposed to see everyone. I am not everyone's cup of tea, and I actually pride myself on that.
Which is good, because it actually, I think, puts more credibility that it's not don't take this wrong. I don't want it to be like a sideshow. Like
Literally.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So it's
And I always say, no matter if it's acupuncture, if it's craniosacral therapy, trauma release, Reiki, all the different things, look to your practitioner. Do you like their face? Have you heard their voice? Do you think that you would connect well with them? Look at their name. Does their name look weird to you? That these are all ways your body is literally talking to you to say, this is somebody I would really connect with. When I was taking my trainings, I looked for literally 7 months for a body talk teacher. And there were like multiple. There was like 30 or 40 I could have picked from. I creeped out their Facebook pages. I looked at their faces. I looked at their names. I looked for videos to see if I could hear their voice, because I was like, is this somebody that I could actually have a meaningful connection with and that I would be able to receive what I was going into that connection with? So really, really sit in with who you're going to as a practitioner, because not everybody is meant to be your practitioner.
And I think that itself lends more credibility to you as well.
100%.
So
Yeah.
perfect. Okay. Last question here.
Yeah.
You're on a podcast called Now for Someone Completely Interesting, because you are someone completely interesting. But if you had to recommend someone who you think is completely interesting, I'm not saying they have to come on the podcast, but Just a quick name and maybe a little bit of why.
Oh, I'm like, there are so many people. Do they have to be local?
No.
No?
No, someone you know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there is a beautiful soul named Kayla Kavisto, who is a Akashic Records reader. Crystal Brodziak is a good friend of mine who I also met through the 100 Cups of Coffee, who is also an incredible human that I think has a beautiful story. I'm trying to think. There's so many people that I would recommend.
Fair warning, Crystal is on the list.
Oh, so. Perfect. Good. Okay, well, Crystal, we'll take you off the list now, off of my list anyways.
I haven't actually told her yet, but if she listens to this, she'll find out. Yeah.
I know Brenda's been on the podcast, so she's another one that came to mind. Yeah. Shanice Biddleick is my sister.
Okay.
If you think I'm an interesting person, shit, she has an even more interesting day job than I do. Yeah, I think there's everyone has a story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just think it's interesting how my guests find these points about people. And it also gives me don't worry, I'm taking notes. Awesome. My guest once again has been Richel Brousseau. Thank you so much again for joining me. I appreciate it. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please make sure you give us a like and subscribe through your favorite podcast provider. You can find us by searching Poulin Radio, or now for someone completely interesting and absolutely, without a doubt, just that. Richel Brousseau, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ben. Today was a pleasure.